Let's grab this and screw it. All right.
The past few years have been pretty disappointing in the gaming industry, save for a few great games. And there's many reasons why, but first, let's start off with the biggest reason, which is of course, business. Companies are looking to maximize their return on investment even if that means lowering the overall quality of a product. That's the reason why we see publishers cutting content out of the base game only to be sold later on as DLC for extra. And to add insult to injury, they'll market the season pass for a game that hasn't even been released yet. I'd also argue that a lot of publishers and developers are allocating resources towards DLC that otherwise would have went towards the base game. Now, why would they do that? Well, that's because, as you probably know by now, the quality of a game doesn't determine how many copies are sold. It's a factor, but it's not the only factor. Of course, the best way to sell a game these days is to pour a ton of money into marketing. Nothing sells a game like hype and advertising. You hype a game up, make it sound like the next big thing, and then you'll get people to pre-order it and maybe even pre-order the season pass as well. And when they finally get the game, it's not at all what it was advertised to be. Sound familiar? It's obvious that a lot of major publishers don't really care about the quality of the game too much as long as it sells well. And that's because I don't think that the heads of Activision are going home after a long day at the office to play COD or Destiny. They're businessmen and this is their business. They'll do whatever they have to do to make as much profit as possible. But this leads us to the second problem I see with the gaming industry, and that's the motto that some businessmen hold, which is don't innovate, replicate. And that sums up a lot of what you see in the gaming industry. It's the reason why we get so many sequels, DLCs, and remasters. It's why new IPs are so scarce. It's much safer for a publisher to rehash an old game than it is to come up with a brand new one, and that's because innovation is risky. You run the risk of consumers not liking that innovation. However, if more publishers and developers took that risk, we'd have a lot more diversity in the gaming industry, and we'd probably have a few more gems because while it is risky, a few of those innovations could become something truly spectacular. But I know it must be hard for some developers with bold ideas because investors are probably scared to invest in something new. So instead, we have all of these dried up, stale titles getting sequels instead of new and innovative IPs. And I say innovative IPs because just because something's a new IP doesn't mean it's going to be a new experience. A lot of the time, a new IP is just
Batch engine 314, traffic collision, unknown of injuries, Broadway at 20th.
What would you do if it all came back to you? Crash to the train, bright as lightning.
I don't consider myself a hero, but I've met more heroes in this experience than I've ever thought existed.
Thank you for your hard work. your medication. I love you, Daddy.
I've been waiting for this day my whole life. I fulfilled my dream, follow my father's footsteps.
Here we go. Alright guys, what's up? This is Neverwinter. Just a chill gameplay, trying to get some AD here.
Boy, kids, get you with League of Legends. What's happening? Somebody say free, because League of Legends is one of the most popular free games in the world.
This light right next to my head here is
Isn't that
crazy.
Pay?
Maybe I should.
Whoa, it's been a while, but let's not waste time. Welcome to my Dream MMO, where I talk about what will be in my Dream MMO, not your Dream MMO, so shut it. In my last video, I talked about doing away with levels and essentially making everyone max level from the start. This was bad phrasing on my part, because by putting it that way, many people assumed that meant there would be no character control because you were quote-unquote maxed out. That's not the case. Hence, I'm going to talk about character progression. Second, because to understand how progression affects your character, you need to understand what I meant in the last video. To explain it a bit more simply, my idea is that when you start the game as a brand new player, you can immediately do whatever you want to. You can log in and then
Just had to dart him to me.
A bunch of people who've been playing forever, go explore, start crafting, again, whatever you want. That's my idea. But that doesn't mean there won't be progression. In most of MMOs today, character progression is class and level based. I honestly have nothing against this. It is a rewarding and simple way to judge how your character is growing in power. However, I feel like this system goes against three of my core ideas for my Dream MMO. One, possibly the most important part of being able to do what you want right from the start is that when you group up with players who
These guys need some milk.
your character will have to be somewhat effective and useful to the group. For some reason, most level-based systems create huge gaps in power between low-level characters and high-level.
Everybody here needs some milk.
Fragments the player base. This could be fixed to maintain the level system, of course, but I think reason number two is the other reason I don't really feel like this could go into my Dream MMO. Two, a level-based system almost requires the world to be segmented based on level. Area A is this level to this level, area B
I can't even attack this guy, bro.
I want my world to be
Where is our tank?
cohesive. While this could be fixed too by adjusting your level to whatever area you're in, kind of like Guild Wars 2, I just don't feel that's the right answer. And third, I don't have anything against set classes either, without these appealing, but I like flexibility even more.
It is very boring.
So to accomplish this, I'm suggesting a type of classless skill-based progression. Here's how my ideas work. And heads up, this is probably
This
going
light.
to sound really convoluted. And please note, I still don't
Burning
have
my
all the
cornea.
ideas worked out fully. This is just an idea. So if something doesn't sound like it'll work, it's probably because I haven't figured it out yet. Okay, here's how it works. Skills will raise as you do the corresponding action. So if you swing a sword, your sword skill will raise. If you cast a spell, your spell casting will raise. That sounds pretty easy, right? Well, this is where it's going to start sounding convoluted. But I have reasons, so hear me out. And remember, this is just an idea. I don't have everything worked out, so don't jump to conclusions. Okay, so let's say you equip a one-handed
my
longsword and start
freaking
swinging around.
God.
You're using melee or melee or whatever, which is a major skill set under the combat tree. You then break down melee into several subsections. You'll have things like swordplay, brawling,
Damn.
axe wielding, and some others that I haven't figured out. Since you're using a longsword, we'll then look at swordplay, which can actually be broken down further.
That
into
light was
longsword,
too
broadswords,
intense.
curved swords, piercing weapons. The list could
Got how to
probably
turn it
go
off.
on. So as you use your longsword, you'll be
It was
raising
too-
3 skills at one time: melee, swordplay, and longsword. The more specialized the skill, the longer.
Damn,
it takes to
everybody
raise up.
dipped.
Special attacks and abilities will be given when hitting certain ranks in each skill. So a
I'm
generic
gonna wait for
strong
for
blow
more
may be
people.
given when hitting a certain point in the melee skill.
Oh, it
While a
reset
more
it?
powerful
No, it
skill
didn't
like,
reset.
say, Cyclone Slash would be given when hitting a certain point in the longsword skill. So the longer you use your longsword, the more powerful you'll become at using the longsword. All 3 of these skills that you're raising provide bonuses to your damage, accuracy, etc. Okay, but wait. Say you just so happen to find a really powerful two-handed broadsword.
Oh, boy.
Well, I'm not a swordsman in real life. So
Oh,
I'm
he
gonna pick a
heals when you
different
go to the
analogy.
black one.
Swinging a baseball bat and swinging a
Ah,
ping pong paddle
that's
are not the
funny.
same. Sure, a lot of the same skills are used.
That's
but
very
there's
funny.
A difference. I assume the same could be said for fighting with a one-handed longsword and a two-handed broadsword. So you're an amazing longswordsman who starts using a broadsword.
Of all
Well,
things,
you're gonna get
that's the only
bonuses
thing
from using
that got
broadsword from
fixed.
your melee and swordplay
He
abilities.
never
And
used
you
to
will also
heal
have built up
when he
some
went to the
progress in
black stuff
broadsword skill from using a
portal.
longsword, but you're not
But now
going
he
to be an
does.
expert at it because it's a different kind of sword. And the more you use the broadsword and gain ability in that area, your longsword skill will begin to decrease. Now, it will never fully go away because you never forget how to ride a bike, or some analogy like that. And your abilities that you've learned from longsword will never go away, but they will decrease in damage, accuracy, etc. Also, skills won't decrease until you start getting too many skills close to max. The reason I decided to have skills degrade is to help keep balance. While I think you should be able to do whatever you want, I don't think
It says no more player will be sent here,
you're a
so
master of a few things, but not everything at once. I do also think you should be able to lock certain skills to stop them from degrading. So you could lock your longsword skill and continue to use that broadsword, but that broadsword skill may not raise depending on what other skills you have and which ones you have locked. Now say you wanted to lose the sword and move over to being an archer who uses a longbow. Okay, the same rules apply, except now you're in an entirely different tree. So as you use your longbow, your ranged tree, archery, it's been a while. But let's not waste time. Welcome to My Dream MMO, where I talk about what would be in my dream MMO. Not your dream MMO, so shut it. In my last video, I talked about doing away with levels and essentially making everyone max level from the start. This was bad phrasing on my part, because by putting it that way, many people assumed that meant there would be no character progression at all because you were quote-unquote maxed out. That's not the case. Hence, I'm going to talk about character progression in just a second, because to understand how progression affects your character, you need to understand what I meant in the last video. To explain it a bit more simply, my idea is that when you start the game as a brand new player, you can immediately do whatever you want to. You could log in and immediately go on a raid with a bunch of people who've been playing forever, go explore, start crafting, again, whatever you want. That's my idea. But that doesn't mean there won't be character progression. In most MMOs today, character progression is class and level based. I honestly have nothing against this system. It is a rewarding and simple way to judge how your character is growing in power. However, I feel like this system goes against 3 of my core ideas for my dream MMO. 1. Possibly the most important part of being able to do what you want right from the start is that when you group up with players who've been playing for longer than you, your character will have to be somewhat effective and useful to the group. For some reason, most level-based systems create huge gaps in power between low-level characters and high-level characters, which immediately fragments the player base. This could be fixed to maintain the level system, of course, but I think reason number 2 is the other reason I don't really feel like this could go into my dream MMO. 2. A level-based system almost requires the world to be segmented based on level. Area A is this level to this level, Area B is this level to this level, and so on. I want my world to be a bit more cohesive. While this could be fixed too by adjusting your level to whatever area you're in, kind of like Guild Wars 2, I just don't feel that's the right answer. And the third point, I don't have anything against set classes either. I do love me some healing, but I like flexibility even more. So to accomplish this, I'm suggesting a type of classless skill-based progression. Here's how my ideas work, and heads up, this is probably going to sound really convoluted. And please note, I still don't have all the ideas worked out fully, this is just an idea. So if something doesn't sound like it'll work, it's probably because I haven't figured it out yet. Okay, here's how it works. Skills will raise as you do the corresponding action. So if you swing a sword, your sword skill will raise.
yeah, I'm trying to implement this into my game.
That sounds pretty easy, right? Well, this is
But
where
it's
it's
gonna
going to
be a
start
little
sounding
different.
convoluted. But I have reasons, so hear me out. And remember, this
It's gonna
is
be
just
like
an
endgame
idea. I don't
type
have
of
everything
stuff.
worked out, so don't jump to conclusions. Okay, so let's say you equip a one-handed longsword and start swinging away. You're using melee,
Let's go collect.
melee, or whatever, which is a major skill set under the combat tree. You then break down melee into several subsections. You'll have things like swordplay, brawling, axe wielding, and some others that I haven't figured out. Since you're using a longsword, we'll then look at swordplay, which can actually be broken down further into longswords, broadswords, curved swords, piercing weapons. The list could probably go on. So as you use your longsword, you'll be raising 3 skills at one time: melee, swordplay, and longsword. The more specialized the skill, the longer it takes to raise up. Special attacks and abilities will be given when hitting certain ranks in each skill. So a generic strong blow may be given when hitting a certain point in the melee skill, while a more powerful skill like, say, Cyclone Slash would be given when hitting a certain point in the longsword skill. So the longer you use your longsword, the more powerful you'll become at using a longsword. All 3 of these skills that you're raising provide bonuses to your damage, accuracy, etc. Okay, but wait. Say you just so happen to find a really powerful 2-handed broadsword that you really want to use. Well, I'm not a swordsman in real life, so I'm gonna make a different analogy here. Swinging a baseball bat and swinging a ping pong paddle are not the same. Sure, a lot of the same skills are used, but there's a difference. I assume the same could be said for fighting with a one-handed longsword and a 2-handed broadsword. So you're an amazing longswordsman who starts using a broadsword. Well, you're gonna get bonuses from using that broadsword from your melee and swordplay abilities. And you will also have built up some progress in broadsword skill from using a longsword, but you're not going to be an expert at it because it's a different kind of sword. And the more you use the broadsword and gain ability in that area, your longsword skill will begin to decrease. Now, it will never fully go away because you never forget how to ride a bike, or some analogy like that. And your abilities that you've learned from longsword will never go away, but they will decrease in damage, accuracy, etc. Also, skills won't decrease until you start getting too many skills close to max. The reason I decided to have skills degrade is to help keep balance. While I think you should be able to do whatever you want, I don't think you should be able to be all-powerful. You can be a master of a few things, but not everything at once. I do also think you should be able to lock certain skills to stop them from degrading. So you could lock your longsword skill and continue to use that broadsword, but that broadsword skill may not raise depending on what other skills you have and which ones you have locked. Now say you wanted to lose the sword and move over to being an archer who uses a longbow. Okay, the same rules apply, except now you're in an entirely different tree. So as you use your longbow, your ranged tree, archery subset, and longbow skill will all increase. Simultaneously, your melee, swordplay, and any specialized skills will decrease. Again, you never forget the moves that you've learned in the melee tree, they'll just begin to decrease in power the lower their skill goes. The same thing will apply to the magic tree. Also, the trees can somewhat interact with each other. Let's take a look at crafting, which will be its own tree. So let's say you're a blacksmith. Using your smith hammer will also raise your hammer wielding ability in the combat tree. Or as a lumberjack, cutting down a forest with your axe will raise your axe wielding skill. So technically, your character could never fight a battle in their life, yet be an extremely strong fighter because of the crafting profession you chose. Now what about armor? You can wear whatever armor you want in the game. Cloth, leather, chain, plate, I don't care. But the heavier the armor you wear, you'll receive penalties to your attack speed, movement speed, dodge, etc. Now the longer you use whatever armor you're wearing, the penalties you receive will decrease. The penalties will never fully go away, but they will lessen as your proficiency with a certain armor type increases. If you decide to switch armor types, you're going to have to build up a new armor proficiency, causing your previous ones to decrease. I have toyed with the idea of when you use heavy armor and moving to light armor, it increases your speed and your strength and stuff, but I haven't fully worked that out yet, and there's a balance there that I need to go over that I'm just not even gonna touch right now. Man, this is getting long. Let's try to wrap this up. Okay, so let's say you want to fill a tankish role. You're gonna want more health, right? Well, go get hit by some monsters. This will raise your endurance. Say you're a mage and you want more mana for casting spells. Start casting spells. Or you can find books to read in-game, which will raise your intellect. But wait, didn't you say when new players join the game they should be able to do whatever they want? Doesn't this mean they're gonna have to raise skills to do what they want? No. When a player joins the game, they can choose to have a pre-made path, or they can choose a custom one. A pre-made path is going to be something like heavy armor tank, light armor tank, dual sword wielding DPS, magic healer, mage DPS. Picking one of these will slightly alter their skills and gear to be a bit more efficient in that area when they start off. So that way that player can immediately jump in and begin helping out a group. If you choose a custom build, you can do whatever you want. Again, this will all have a balance to it that I haven't quite figured out yet, but it'll be there. So I think that covers it. Probably not. Again, this is all just a work in progress and I don't have all the answers, and I'm sure you have questions, so if you want to leave me a question in the comments, I'll try to answer it if I can find an answer. Yeah. Okay, bye.
Hey, my brother. Yeah, how you doing, brother? Man, I'm doing good. Yup.
Welcome back
Yeah,
to
I
My
know,
Dream
right?
MMO, where I talk about what would be in my dream MMO. Now, if I haven't said it enough already, this is my dream MMO, not yours. So if you disagree, that's great. Feel free to leave a constructive comment below. That might spur some conversation. But please keep it cordial. I don't come to your house and shatter your dreams. So last time we started with one of the first things you do in most MMOs, which is picking a race. So naturally, we're just gonna jump straight to endgame. Well, not technically endgame, but you'll see what I mean. Why the jump ahead? I think if you all know how the content in the game will work, it'll help put the other elements I talk about in context. Now, in most MMOs, endgame usually consists of a few things. Raiding, gear grinds, rep grinds, achievement hunting, and PvP. There's probably a few others in there. And if a game has a housing/building mechanic, you can throw that in there too. But, you know, there's one thing that I've really wanted in MMOs lately for a long time that's missing from that list. But we'll get to that in a second. I'm just gonna say this now. F*** endgame. Or at least the notion of endgame. How many times have you heard the phrase, "The real game begins when you hit max level"? I hate that phrase. Like, really hate that phrase. Why on earth do I have to play a game for a week or two leveling up when that's apparently not where the fun part of the game is? So my dream MMO will do away with all that crap. Wait, you ask, isn't that going to give players less content? No, shut up. Developers spend a ton of time designing these enormous worlds full of bland kill quests that you end up blowing through as fast as possible. And once you finish them, you'll likely never even think about that area again. Talk about a waste of time. Developers design a huge world only to have players end up sitting in a main city waiting on an instant group queue for a raid or a dungeon or a PvP battleground. This also limits the amount of development time devs get to work on their end game, which is arguably where most of the players are going to end up spending most of their time in their MMO life. So why not make end game your entire game? That may sound weird, but hear me out. Start the player out where they can immediately do whatever they want to. Don't make them waste their damn time on subpar content. In my dream MMO, you could hop in on day one and go join a raid and be somewhat useful. You could go do a dungeon or craft to try and get some better armor if you want to be more effective. Go do some PvP if you want. This also helps keep the player base together. Instead of separating everyone out by level, even new players can group up with people who've been playing for months and help out. Granted, they won't be as effective, but they can still play together. But I can hear y'all now, if you start everyone at max level, how do they learn their skills? I don't want to group with a bunch of noobs. Well, there's a few ways around this. 1, a good freaking tutorial, and I mean a good one. 2, be kind to your fellow man and help them learn. 3, learn by doing. 4, shut up and play the damn game. Anyway, so now all I have is a game where everyone stands around crafting, waiting on queues for raids and dungeons and PvP? No. Here's that one thing I brought up earlier that I think is missing for most MMOs. Exploration. Think about this. Instead of filling this giant world you've built with crappy kill quests that provide nothing after they've been finished, fill it with random dungeons, secret areas to discover, roaming raid level bosses, bands of roaming enemies, player-run cities, and like an epic type of quest that would take you all over the world and take a long time to complete. Think like Lord of the Rings, taking the ring to Mordor, that type of epic quest. And make the exploration of this giant world you built part of your end game, or actual game, you know what I mean. Now, this is just an example of how my dream MMO would be compared to a game that already exists. So take World of Warcraft or some other MMO, I don't really care. In my dream MMO, all players would start at max level with some semi-decent equipment to start out with. Take the giant world that the devs have built, remove all those crappy kill and fetch quests that are designed specifically for leveling, and fill the world with all those things that I mentioned above. But I can hear you now. What about when everything's explored? Now, this is actually going to be a video of its own, so I'm not going to delve too much into it here, but I've always thought the best part of Minecraft was the fact that there's always something new to discover because of procedural generation. And I think there's got to be a way for this to be done in a persistent world MMO. Whether or not it's technically possible, I don't really care. I'm not concerned with that. This is a dream after all. But even if it's not possible, instead of concentrating on new quest and NPC dialogue and crazy stuff like that, the devs could just be designing new zones and implement them as they're finished. Think about Arcade, where you can build a boat and sail the seas. And now think about if you could discover an island that has actually never been seen by anyone else before. You could set up a castle on it and rule the land with an iron fist. Actual discovery and exploration. That's my goal. And that's the game. And end game. The full game. Discovery and exploration, as well as the other things that you currently love to do, like raiding, dungeoning, grinding, and none of that bland kill and fetch quest bullshit.
I wanted to just keep running. Yeah, I really want to. I don't want to come right now and make try to figure it something, but there's something away. I can say yeah, true, but the thing is you cannot just wait or once it you say okay yeah, true, and you know all the things that were happening here, like good things were happening for people. So they think
I wish that you would love me. I wish that you would love me more.
How's it going, guys? My name is Mint, and today I've got a video for you that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and it's going to be on MMOs as a whole, as a genre, if you will, or as a subsection of RPGs. Now, if you watch my channel, you'll know that I'm really quite into MMOs. It's my favourite type of game to play. I love the idea of making a unique character and playing it alongside my friends and enemies alike in a really expansive and interesting world. I love the sense of progression you get as well, and the fact that you can really invest some time into it. This video is going to be about a common problem that I've noticed, which seems to exist across all MMOs and just pervades the mentality of developers and players of MMORPGs and MMO games in general. Now, this problem could essentially be summed up as expectation.
You mean Iowa?
Need for perfection. And really the problem exists
Bro, I was in Iowa this
and during and after the release of these games. Now, if you think about why MMOs have such high expectations, why they're so hyped compared to other genres of games, well, it's really down to 3 key reasons. An MMO needs to be perfect due to the time investment that you need to put into playing the game to have the most out of it, the possible extra costs of playing an MMO, such as subscription, cash shops, etc., and also the pull from a current MMO that you might be playing or just other games in general. MMOs are a massive time
Yeah,
sink
see that,
compared to
Roddy?
other
Yeah.
games. Any single-player game, regardless of genre, from Dark Souls to Resident Evil to Wolfenstein, these games can be picked up and played at any point in time, and it doesn't matter if they're perfect, because really, the investment required to get at least some enjoyment out of the game is minimal. Resident Evil 7, for example, whilst an excellent game in my opinion, has a campaign that can be completed in maybe 6 to 8 hours, depending on how quick you are. In comparison, MMO games, even the least polished MMO, will require dozens of hours usually to get to max level, and many of them only really start to get truly interesting once you are at that max level. So this has always been an issue. Players are quite territorial with MMOs as well, which means expectation has to be even higher. Perfection needs to be achieved in order to pull them away from what they're already playing. There's no sense of, I don't think this is 100% my thing, need to try a new game in single player games. For example, if you're playing an RPG like Dark Souls, there's no part of you which says, oh, this game isn't 100% my sort of idea of what an RPG should be, therefore I'm going to put it down, never play it again and start playing something like Skyrim instead. You don't really get that in single player games, and there's nothing which stops you from saying, okay, well I won't play this game right now, but I'll pick up and play Skyrim and then maybe come back to Dark Souls a little bit later. That really doesn't tend to be the trend with MMOs because of the fact that you have to invest time in it. It goes back to that old thing. You really need to invest time and effort and a bit of love really to get the most out of an MMO, and if you're constantly switching between different ones to get a taste for each, then you're probably not going to really find any of them particularly thrilling or worth investing your time into. So expectation for these games to be perfect is really, really high. The hype is always real with every MMO. We've seen it so often. Elder Scrolls Online, Warhammer Age of Reckoning, WildStar. Every single one that comes out seems to have the exact same trend. Everyone says it's going to be either a WoW killer, that was a big thing back in the late 2000s, or that it's going to herald in the new generation of MMOs, or whatever it might be. And usually it's always bullshit because of the fact that the expectations are so ridiculously high, even the best game can't really live up to them. I think a really good comparison to make outside of the MMO world is the Half-Life series. Now I've just played through Half-Life 1 and 2 in the episodes for the first time. Please don't shoot me, I know I'm a real noob to have waited so long before completing this excellent series of games, but a lot of people complain and are kind of a bit salty over the fact that Valve has never released Half-Life 3, and most people agree that they probably never will because of the fact that it's been hyped so much that they know it would never live up to expectation, even if it was a Class A stellar FPS. And really this is the same sort of thing that goes on in the MMO world, except that with MMOs, the desire to gain player interest early on during the development cycle is extremely important to the success of the game. When your game is all about having a massive number of people playing from the first day for months onwards, then you really need to generate interest and hype early on. But they can never live up to this interest and expectation because of how high the demand for perfection is within the MMO community. Now, the fault for this high expectation doesn't really lie with the player base in my opinion, nor really does it lie with the developers most of the time. It's the nature of the beast really. Due to the investment and grand expectations of a new MMO to provide excellent PvP, well-structured, challenging yet accessible endgame PvE content, fulfilling leveling experience, great combat, and modern graphics / great animations and really detailed character creation means that no game is able to live up to the hype. In other games, especially single-player games, you don't really need all of these things to make a game really good. Games don't have to have the best graphics ever to be really fun if they've got great gameplay. They don't even need to have a good story. Like, look at the new Doom game, for example. Reckoned to be one of the best in the series and definitely one of the best FPSs released in recent times. The story isn't the main focus of the game, but it looks amazing and has great combat, and so people want to play it. In an MMO, that's not enough. Games need to have great combat, they need to have great leveling experience, and all of the things that I just listed there. Developers can't be expected to get everything 100% right, especially in an MMO where the expectation and the hype is so great for a game to surpass the giant titles that it's standing on the shoulders of, such as World of Warcraft. But even World of Warcraft wasn't perfect upon its release, it capitalised on a relatively sparse market. New MMOs have not only got to contend with WoW's domination, but show that they can beat it in all these fields that I've described as well as that. I really think that this explains why we've had a drop-off in large companies trying to produce MMOs in recent years. If If you remember in the 2000s, there were a lot of titles which came out, such as Warhammer Age of Reckoning and Age of Conan as well, which were trying to contend with WoW's dominance at the time. I think that was a period where people realised the potential for MMOs to draw a large and loyal fan base, but they never seemed to live up to those expectations. And since then, the expectations for a game to surpass World of Warcraft's greatness have just built and built and built. And this has meant that companies don't want to take the risk of spending millions of pounds developing a game that after a few months will be practically dead, as we've seen with many titles over the last 5 or 6 years. And at the same time, we've seen small indie teams developing crowd-funded games such as Chronicles of Illyria, Project Gorgon, and many, many more, capitalising not only on the sparse amount of titles being produced by larger companies, but also what is perceived as the lack of interest in the MMO genre and the lack of understanding of what players actually want in a new MMORPG. But the problem with these small dev teams is that often their projects can't come to fruition due to a lack of resources, team members, or funding. And at the same time, they have to compete with larger titles which are already successful, such as Guild Wars 2 or World of Warcraft, of course, with much less to go on and a very disadvantageous start. And to be honest, from my own perspective, these reasons have always led me to be sceptical of the ability and the potential of these smaller indie-developed MMOs to draw in vast numbers of players, and particularly to draw players away from the major MMOs, which is where they really need to get their player base. So now that I've covered what the problem is, in my opinion, what can we do about it? Well, as players, I think that first and foremost, we have to be careful about overhyping titles, especially titles that are far, far away from being released, because all this does is develops a train, the hype train as it's called, we all know that term, which means that an MMO and a game in general will never ever be able to live up to the expectations, even if it's very good. Hype is the bane of MMOs, and WoW escaped it partially due to the smaller player base in MMOs in the early 2000s and the lack of any credible contemporary standard to hold it against. Now we can think about things like Star Wars Galaxies or EverQuest, for example, but those games were quite different to WoW, and also they were, well, in the case of EverQuest at least, they are from kind of a different generation really. WoW not only had players that you could draw upon from the strategy games, but also it seemed new, it seemed invigorated, it seemed like it was going to revitalise a rather fledgling but also kind of wearied genre that was the MMO game, and it did, but it didn't do it because of hype. Now a lot of people were talking about WoW before it was released and when it was in its beta stages, don't get me wrong, that is a fact, and that contributed a lot to its success as a game. But this was once the game had already been made. This was once people were able to try it and see it for themselves, and they realised how good it was. It wasn't in a stage of development where people were just going on bits of information, scraps, concept art, descriptions, etc., and interviews with the developers. These things can't tell you as a player whether or not the actual game itself will be what you want it to be. With World of Warcraft, people started really hyping the game when they played it and they could tell their friends, this is awesome, this is what you need to be playing. And honestly, I don't think we've had that MMO come out in the last 10 or really even 13 years since WoW was released in 2004, which really gripped people in the same way. I don't think one has been released like that. You could argue that games such as Guild Wars 2, for example, had really good starts, critics were raving about them, saying this is something really new and revolutionary, but there was never that sense of, oh, this game is going to really definitely take me away from World of Warcraft. And you've got to also bear in mind that the Tevs, Blizzard, they're really good at staggering their own content. Massive patches or expansions being released at the same time as other competing titles being released, including Guild Wars 2, including Elder Scrolls Online, that sort of thing. They never really seem to have a period where a game is going to be released and Blizzard don't have a major patch or an expansion in mind to make players say, oh well, maybe I'll try this other MMO, but I will probably eventually go back to World of Warcraft to explore what's going to be released in a few months' time. And this brings me on to the next key thing that I think we as players can do to make our experience with the MMO genre a bit more enjoyable, a bit less disappointing, and that is be willing to try something new. I like to say this quite a bit on my channel, and I love to try out new MMOs and video them for you guys. But really, you've got to think about it like this. We all got into MMOs initially from trying them out. It doesn't matter what the MMO was, it doesn't matter whether it was World of Warcraft or EverQuest or any other game. We all got into this genre, this subgenre, because we wanted to try it out for ourselves and see whether there was anything to this idea of playing a massively multiplayer online game. And like I said earlier, this idea that a game might not be 100% for you and you might not want to try it as much as another game, it's really important with MMOs, and you've got to be willing to test different ones out and see which one best fulfills your needs. Being overly territorial about a game is absolutely fucking pointless, guys. It's It's the same as being really territorial with a console. It benefits no one except the company that have made the product. What you should be doing is testing different things to see what benefits you best. And that brings me on to the final thing that I think that we can do as players, and that is be willing to accept the imperfections of the game. World of Warcraft is never going to have combat like Terra, but Terra is never going to have endgame like World of Warcraft. WoW's leveling might not be as fun as Elder Scrolls Online's leveling, but at the same time you might prefer the class system of WoW over a game like Elder Scrolls, for example. It's important to accept imperfections and realise that no game is perfect, single player or multiplayer, but if you're really having fun with a game, why not just be happy with that and settle for what you're doing, you know what I mean? So in conclusion, I made this video really because lately I found myself wanting to invest my time into an MMO again. And normally this would result in me just going straight back to WoW, but I didn't really have a character in mind that I strongly wanted to play at the time. And I didn't really know where I wanted to begin with it, so I was looking around for different MMOs to play. I played a bit of Elder Scrolls Online with a friend. I've been playing vanilla, as you know, and let me just plug in that there will be a video released within the next couple of days, guys. I'm going to be videoing that tonight for you. It's partially why I wanted to make this, so I can tell you about it. But back to what I'm saying, the point is that I didn't really know what I wanted to play, and it took me time to think about it. And that's where I came across this problem, really. The problem is that you play one MMO and you realise that it's just not 100% what you're wanting. You've got to be willing to set aside, not overhype, accept the imperfections of a game as they are, and also try new things out. Because a lot of the time, as is what has happened with me, you might try out a different MMO, as I tried out Elder Scrolls Online, and realise, you know what, this is fun, but it's actually making me realise that I do want to play World of Warcraft. So anyway guys, there was a little rant video from me there about MMOs. I know that like me, a lot of you guys are very much passionate about this subgenre. It's very good to discuss it because it will help you enjoy it more and realise that, you know, these problems can be overcome if you think about them, and also just look forward to the next title that might be released. But anyway guys, if you enjoyed this video, I would really encourage you to subscribe and like the video if you haven't already. It really does help me out and encourages me to make more content, and I shall see you in the next video that I make. Goodbye and have a great day.
Hey guys, it's Dylan. I've been thinking a lot about the MMO landscape lately, and why no MMOs really seem to stick with me or my buddies. We just bounce around aimlessly from MMO to MMO, from free to play to subscription to buy to play. It doesn't matter. Nothing holds our focus, and nothing holds the consumer's focus in general. I don't think it's just a developer problem. I think it's also a consumer problem. And I know you don't want to hear that it's your fault, but it is. It's yours, it's mine, it's the developer, it's everybody's. And since we're all to blame, I present to you why MMOs suck.
I belong to
Now you're probably telling yourself, Dylan, why am I to blame? I didn't do anything wrong. I just played my games like a good little boy. Well, you didn't technically do anything wrong. I started playing World of Warcraft around 2004-2005. I was about 12 years old. I didn't know about raiding. I didn't know about dungeons. I didn't care about getting in-game gear and, you know, getting the next fat loot and the next epic. I was there to log on, explore the world, play with my friends, and just have a good time. Now, I know a lot of people say EverQuest did it first, etc., etc. I didn't play EverQuest. I know a lot of people are going to hate on me for that, and that's fine. But I really want to talk about the first issue that's plaguing the MMO genre, the copycat. We've all heard the term WoW clone, WoW killer, WoW copy, WoW whatever you want to say, because WoW was the first MMO to really break through into the general consumer market. It was the biggest, the baddest, the best. It was everything that every MMO wanted to be, success-wise. But the issue that games like Rift, Final Fantasy XIV, Star Wars The Old Republic, every single free-to-play game, just the list goes on and on and on. They didn't understand what made WoW great. WoW wasn't great because it had raids or dungeons. WoW was great because it had this world that you were a part of. I would go home every day in middle school and I would log in and I would see my friends on and I would know people, and there was a server community. It wasn't just me jumping in from instance to instance randomly with the LFG tool. I had to run there. It was dangerous. I felt like I was a part of something. I didn't feel like I was just sitting in my garrison queuing up for a dungeon. And that seems to me like that is what all the WoW copycats thought that WoW did great. And there are games that don't hold your hand and you have to figure out your own path, but they have their own problems and they're just not for me. Games like Black Desert Online, which, you know, I played quite a bit. I played the Korean version, played through early access and the head start here. It didn't have that same effect on me. And I really think that comes down to me and you and everyone. I see people on Reddit posting 24/7, oh, MMOs today just suck. Not really. That's the thing. If I was 14 years old again and had the, you know, wide array of choices that we have today for MMOs, I would be overwhelmed. But I've been spoiled. I feel like as consumers, we're broken. Which brings me to my second point, the consumer. And you can disagree with me all you want. This is based on my own personal experiences. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm attacking them or blaming them. That's not the point of this video. I've been playing Black Desert Online quite a bit, and it just really isn't sticking with me. Technically, from what I say I want in an MMO, I should love this game. But I don't. I say to myself, man, I wish there was just a world I could be a part of where I'm not racing to level cap, not participating in the gear grind and raid grind, and just doing my dailies. And Black Desert Online technically is that game. I could start just being a fisherman out on my raft at level 15 if I wanted, and it's okay. You set your own goals. But I can't. Something in me has changed since I started World of Warcraft over 10 years ago. I feel like I have to be the most efficient. I feel like I have to race to max level. I feel like I'm missing out if I don't. And it's really hard to reprogram myself not to feel these things. I even find myself racing to max level, trying to find the best loot, being the most efficient. I find myself doing these in freaking single player games. I did it in The Witcher 3 and I had to physically tell myself stop. I don't know if it's just because I've gotten older and I've figured out how games work, and I know that if I do certain things certain ways, that I'll be the best player on my server or I'll get the best armor quicker. And that's what I'm saying. No matter if it's World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XI, Ultima Online, whatever your first MMO was, no MMO will ever top that game for you because you figured out how MMOs work. They're all the same. I didn't know how MMOs work when I first started playing games. I was just there for the experience and my friends, and I had an amazing time doing it. Now things have changed so much, and I know every MMO I go into, whether or not it's Blade and Soul, Black Desert, Final Fantasy, any of the free-to-play games coming out, any of the Korean MMOs coming out, I know exactly what to expect. And that's because certain features have become standard of the MMO genre that shouldn't have. And for some reason now, with all these features, which I'll get into just a little bit later, I feel like I'm missing out if I'm not doing them because I know that they're important and I know that I need to do them to progress. Whether or not it's raids, dungeons, or whatever. And that's why I say it's my fault. It's your fault. It's the consumer's fault. We've been conditioned to think, oh, in-game, we gotta have it, we gotta rush there, because that's what these copycats of World of Warcraft thought was important, and what we've been conditioned to thinking is the best part of the game. It's not. That's what these games are missing out on. They're missing out on their soul. And I know that this has been beaten to death, but I'm gonna keep saying this, whether it's in videos, on stream, just to my friends, until it gets fixed. I truly believe that someday there will be a renaissance of MMO gaming, but I don't think it'll come until developers fix the issues, in which I'm going to talk about here in the last segment called The Wrong. Now, I kind of spoke on this earlier, but I'm going to get a little more in depth. There are a lot of mechanics now in MMO games that should not be there, at least as a staple. Raids, dungeons, instanced content, party finders, all of these things were things that were made standard by World of Warcraft, and other developers took those as what caused the success for World of Warcraft. And that's where they're mistaken. World of Warcraft wasn't made great because it had raids. It wasn't great because it had dungeons. It was great because it had everything World of Warcraft needed to have. To me, saying that every MMO needs raids as their endgame, or in-game at all in the traditional sense, is like saying that every shooter needs a rocket launcher. Some games, it just doesn't work in it. Some games don't need wall running. Some games don't need double jump. It works in the context of each game. For an example I'll give of a game that really hit its stride late because it figured this out is Star Wars The Old Republic. Star Wars The Old Republic was kind of a bust on launch. I did not enjoy it at all. I was like, why would I play WoW with lightsabers with less features when I can just go play WoW? And that's because that's all it was. It was WoW with lightsabers. It was the exact same combat, the same quest structure, the same raid structure, the same PvP structure. It was the same everything. The only thing it had going for it was a little bit of personal story that was different. And somewhere around the time it hit free to play, they decided, hey, what if we're not going to be like WoW? What if we focus more on the single player experience and the story? And yeah, back when episode 7 came out and everybody was super hyped for Star Wars, I went through and I played through the Sith Warrior storyline. And it was great. I had thoroughly enjoyed myself, but it didn't really feel like an MMO. But it felt like its own game, that it was what it wanted to be. It didn't want to be World of Warcraft anymore. It wanted to be Star Wars The Old Republic. And that's what we need in games. We don't need, oh, World of Warcraft has raids, let's put raids in it. We don't need the exact same thing in every game. Otherwise, it's like, why would I play it over World of Warcraft? Why would I go have the exact same meal at another restaurant when I'm already paying at this one? I could drone on and on about what MMOs need to do, what they need to do to fix it, but I'm going to cut it here. I really do think that we're heading towards a new era of MMOs eventually. I think games like Black Desert coming out in the West, even though I have a lot of issues with that game, do show that they're willing to do something a little bit different. But I really hope that we break away from this WoW had it, so we have to have it mentality to be successful. I think it's plaguing the industry, and I think we as consumers just expect the WoW formula in games, and we're almost scared to branch out to other things. I feel like my ability to make my own fun in a game is almost broken because of it. But guys, thanks for watching so much. Go ahead and subscribe and like the video if you like it. There'll be more content like this coming out. Also check me out on Twitch. Later, broskies. And if you are interested in checking out a vanilla WoW server, go play on Nostalrius. I'm on the PvP server. Name is Warlandia, and we'll play some.
I belong to
Hey friends, my name is Skylint, and today I'm going to give you my personal pick, my top 10 upcoming sandbox MMOs. Now, there's a lot of sandbox games out there, and there's many sandbox online games out there, but I really am stressing the MMO portion of this list. I'm really focusing on those games that are extremely social and very much are kind of undebatably considered MMO. Okay, but I'm under the assumption that many of you want to know what the upcoming sandbox MMOs are, which ones are good, so I picked 10 of them that I think have the best chance in their respective subgenres to succeed. And yeah, because of the nature of the categorization of this list, 1 through 10 doesn't really matter. There's really no order to the games. They're all unique and different. They all represent a unique genre under the umbrella of sandbox MMO. So as long as you want that freedom of a sandbox, then look at this list and see the different structures that each of these games have uniquely to them. Pick a game and get hype. Let's start the list. Okay friends, the first game I want to talk about is a game called Pyria Chronicles.
Hey guys.
Fact. Coffee stains teeth. Unlike ordinary whitening toothpaste, Colgate Optic White has hydrogen peroxide that goes below the tooth surface for a smile that's 4 shades visibly whiter. Colgate Optic White, whitening that works.
Hi, let's play a heavy metal machines match. It is an online free-to-play game where 2 teams of 4 players fight to pick up a bomb and take it to the enemy base. Deliver the bomb 3 times to be the winner. You'll be controlling deadly vehicles in arenas filled with challenges. You will like it from the start. You can play with the keyboard and mouse or choose any gamepad. If you like dealing damage, you can play with wildfire and set the arena on fire. You can also transport the bomb to the enemy base, so choose a fast or a tough pilot. Or be a support. Play with the vengeful Ghost Wind Rider or any other. Meet all the characters and choose your favorites. Call your friends so you can play together. And whenever you feel ready, try playing the ranked mode or even our tournament, the
Hey gamers, what's up? It's Ed Park, aka Togrim. I want to talk to you today about the design for most MMOs. They use a concept that I call vertical scaling, which I think has a lot of inherent limitations and creates problems in gameplay. And I want to propose a radically different alternative that I'm calling horizontal scaling. So what is vertical scaling? In most major games such as World of Warcraft, Star Wars The Old Republic, Rift, etc., you start off with a level 1 character, you level them to level cap, and then from there there's a new type of vertical scaling where you start picking up tiers of gear, right? That's how most games are designed. It's what most gamers are accustomed to, it's just the way things are, but I think the system is fundamentally flawed and it introduces a lot of problems. One, it's grindy as heck. You have to grind your way to level cap, and then from there you have to grind through whatever lower level tiers there are until you can catch up to where you want to be and experience the end game content. And when new content is released, you have to go through and regrind the new stuff. And you have to do it to be competitive, not just because it's there, it's something to experience, but if you don't do it, then you'll fall behind what everyone else is able to do. You know, the mage standing next to you has got better gear, their fireball is going to hit harder than yours, and there's no way for you to fix it until you go and grind out the same stuff too. That brings us to the second point. A vertical scaling system inherently creates brackets. You can't experience content together unless your level and your, at endgame, your gear tier is sufficiently close with your guildies that it makes sense for you to be running together, or you can run together and it's helpful for some people but face roll easy for others. Like if you totally outgear a certain content or instance and you're running with a friend, you'll be able to one or two shot things, or it's trivial. It doesn't really create a very challenging or dynamic experience. So again, the bracketing system is a very big issue. And this became very apparent when we were playing Star Wars The Old Republic, where there's a PvP bracket that stretches from level 10 to 49, and it turns out it's awesome. There's a bolster mechanic. It's not perfect, right? It doesn't create full parity, but it does provide competitive capability. And the fun thing about this is anyone once they ding level 10 can start running with their guildies who have characters between level 10 and 49, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. But with most games, you don't have that, especially with PvE, because you can only meaningfully experience PvE with people around your same level or gear score. A third problem with the vertical scaling system is that content is initially too difficult, too hard until people get the gear, and then once they get the gear, then you have the opposite problem. The content is now too easy, it's face roll easy, it's not as challenging, it's not as dynamic anymore. And the vertical scaling inherently creates a concept called power creep, where as characters get more stats-wise stronger with their tiered gear, it becomes difficult to balance the game because everything becomes too easy. A fourth problem with vertical scaling is you end up with a lot of dead zones in content. Initially when content is released, people will go through and they'll play it because that's where you get your gear, because it's a vertical scaling system. But once the new expansion is released, the level cap is raised, the existing content from the last X pack and the X packs before it become less and less relevant because you have fewer people. People only go through those zones once through the leveling process for a given character, and generally speaking they don't go back. And what ends up happening is you have the population curve, you have a ton of people at the highest level cap who are doing things that's relevant for that point in time, but people to the leveling experience, it becomes more and more of a ghost town because you have a larger number of zone and instances and levels to cross, and you're simply not going to see as many people. So let's talk about something very different, what I'm calling horizontal scaling. And instead of having the game designed around a vertical progression, what it is instead is about a horizontal progression where you broaden your capabilities. So for example, every new character that's rolled is given a baseline set of abilities. So if I'm a mage, I get single target damage, I get some AoE damage, I get some defensive cooldowns, I get some crowd control. And every mage who rolls level 1 has the same spell book as me, same abilities, and what happens as you gain more experience, you broaden your spell book. So maybe initially I start off with some limited mix of like fire, frost, and earth spells, and then over time I can gain more and more spells to give me different capabilities, different types of AoE effects, different types of crowd control, etc. But inherently, a brand new mage with their fireball will do the same damage as a more experienced mage with a bigger spell book. So they can both do content. The guy with the bigger spell book will have more options as far as customization, but at the end of the day, their fireball still hits the same, their ice land still hits the same, their sheep mechanic still works the same, etc. And if you do this, what this will allow, there's a number of different benefits. So one is that there are no artificial brackets due to level or gear score, right? You can do things with your friends immediately. And if you have a brand new tank character or brand new DPS, you may not have the full set of abilities or spell book that a more experienced player will have, but you'll have the baseline set that you need to function and to do things with them. So you roll a character, you can immediately start playing with your friends. A second benefit is this levels the playing field with respect to PvP and PvE. It's not about the gear score. It becomes more so about your ability to play your character well and to adapt to situations and synergize with your teammates, as opposed to, well, I just don't have enough DPS to contribute before the boss enrages, right? Because I don't have the gear. A third benefit of the horizontal scaling system is that content stays evergreen. It's relevant. So you don't end up with an issue of dead zones, because anyone can run the same content over and over to farm or get or earn whatever achievements or things they're trying to do, and it'll still stay relevant because you don't outgear it, because there's no concept of gear. Granted, you can get, broaden out your spell book so you have more abilities. You can figure out how best to tackle that instance from an optimization standpoint, but the instance is still relevant. Now, I know what the obvious question sitting in the back of all your heads is, well, how do you implement progression for a horizontal scaling system? Obviously I've talked about for classes, you can have them broaden out their spell book so they have more abilities that they can choose from to use, right? That's one way you can do it. There are a few ways you can progress that aren't based around your gear score. So, for example, let's look at real life with sports. If you're a runner, you run obviously for health reasons, but also you run because you're constantly looking at and trying to improve your time. So you're working on your PRs, your personal best for your mile time, for your 10K, for your marathon, whatever type of running you do. And it's the same way for people who golf. People who golf are constantly trying to, break the barrier of 90 strokes for a game, or break the magical 80 barrier so they can get into the 70s and have a single digit, handicap. It's all about performance. And people are both enjoy the numerical aspect of trying to improve their gameplay, as well as being able to share this with friends. And we know this because the social media is wildly popular and people want to share everything that they're achieving, right? So if we look at this from a game perspective, we know back in 2008, Mythic innovated achievements, the system with Warhammer, and that was rapidly adopted and expanded upon by Blizzard in World of Warcraft, and achievements became a huge part of the World of Warcraft game. It was a benchmark to say, I've done these things, I've achieved these things, anyone can see, I can prove it to you, right? So I've done these things in the arena, I've done these things in PvP, I've done these things as far as these raid bosses or raid instances on different difficulties. I've crafted these things, I've done all these things, I've explored these things, whatever, right? And the achievement system is really, really popular. But I think it can be expanded upon much more effectively than it has been. So if we were to take the personal best concept from a golfer or runner, what happens if we were to do that for games too? So it's not just about clearing the instance for the first time, right? It's how fast did you kill this boss? What's your personal best on this boss fight? Is it 5 minutes? This week, did you manage to crack the 5-minute barrier and do it in 4 minutes and 55 seconds, etc., where you have those personal bests? And even more so, what happens if we were to take these personal bests or these records or these scoreboards, these achievements, and make it comparatively visible? So for example, in Warhammer, they had a kill board where I could see as a sword master, where I ranked in the top 10 of players killed, with a sword master. And it was really fun to be able to kind of say, hey, I'm a top 10 killer of my class on this server. But what happens if we were to expand this, like I said, the concept of achievements, so you could compare not just between your character, your guilds, same faction, same server, across geographies, and say, hey, for this week, which guild downed the final boss in this instance the fastest, right? For the last 10 weeks, which guild has most consistently down bosses the fastest? And I think this would create a much more interesting competitive dynamic. Like right now with the existing achievement system, it's all about world first. First time to do it for the game, for a server, for a faction, whatever, but that's such a limiting way to look at it. So world first are only done once by definition in any given context. But what happens after this, after everyone gets this boss strategies down, they're communicated, who can do it the best now? Everyone knows how to do this boss fight. For this week, who did it the best? For the X number of weeks, who's done it the best? And you can say, hey, my guild, we did get the world first or we didn't, but hey, for the last 4 weeks running, we have done the boss fight, executed faster, had the fewest deaths, whatever measurable way, compared to any guild in the world. So we would argue that our guild, even though we didn't do it the first, we are now the masters of that boss fight, right? So that's one way of having progression, even in a horizontal-based system. Another way is cosmetic. So instead of getting gear to make your character hit harder, you get gear because you want to customize the way that it looks, and the way that you get different gear could be based on things like, the achievement system, or it could be based on, reputation, or, getting certain drops, or like I said, for the achievements, it could be because we cleared these instances, we're a consistent top 5 guild in PvE, or we're a consistent top 5 guild in PvP, which allows us to customize or get access to gear that people don't have. And on top of the cosmetic thing, I think it'd be great is, as your guild or individual achievements increase, you can customize the look of your character, you can get guild heraldry, and change the emblem of your guild. And I know some of you are thinking, well, that creates problems because then you'll get Nazi symbols and stuff. And this is what I would say. I think for a game developer, it would be much easier for them to monitor guild heraldry icons and constantly having to build out entirely new content because all the content from the previous expansion is now dead. On top of the cosmetic aspect of gear, what you could do is offer different items in the game which will enhance certain capabilities. So for example, you could have a Cinderburn staff which will beef up a mage's damage over time capability, but there is no concept of having a tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 Cinderburn staff. And if you want to play more of a defensive mage where you have really strong kind of earth shielding spells, your ability to set up obstructions for your opponents, maybe what you get is an Earthbind staff, which will increase the size or area effect of your spells or increase their potency. But again, there's no concept of having a +1 or +2 or tier 1, tier 2 Earthbind staff. It is what it is, and so the game becomes a lot around collecting a broad set of weapons that enhance different capabilities, but there's no concept of having, once you've gotten your staff or your particular flaming sword or your armor reaving axe, that you don't have to go back and regrind it again. You've already earned it, and you can choose to use it when the situation makes sense or if it suits your particular playstyle. So let me know what you think of my ideas around vertical versus horizontal scaling. Like I said, I think that this makes no sense. It's what people are used to, but it's inherently limiting and creates a lame experience, and it creates issues for the developer from a balance and content creation standpoint, versus I think a horizontal system with achievements and things that aren't based on potential power creep or gear offer both a much more rewarding, fun experience, as well as one which is evergreen and is not grindy. Let me know what you think of my ideas by posting comments in this video. Take care.
Okay, Google, what's the weather in San Francisco?
It's 65 degrees and sunny.
Okay, Google, set my thermostat to eco.
Okay.
RPGs though, guys. If you look around in the video game industry, it's happening everywhere. Search on YouTube, for example, for people's complaints about the Halo series and the direction Halo has taken since Halo 5's introduction, and you'll see what I mean. We as gamers once had the keys to the world, the keys to the car. But as time has gone on, we've seen this power of greed, guys, corrupt the genre we once fell in love with. Now, this is something, unfortunately, that has become worse over the years. It started off with subscription fees. Then we saw the introduction of cash shops. And now, I can't believe I'm saying this, we are seeing the rise, and hopefully the fall, of pay-to-win elements in our MMORPGs. Not only that, but we're now seeing the men in business suits trying their best to squeeze money out of these MMORPGs in the most slimy ways possible. They may state they originally are not pay-to-win, like Black Desert Online, but end up being pay-to-win months later. They may state their shops are only cosmetic, but now we're seeing customization for our characters at the selection screen, where you create a character behind a paywall. It may not look like it at first. But if you brush the dirt off and you really look and take a look at it, you'll uncover the truth. These companies, guys, know millions of people play these MMOs. They know MMOs, guys, are a place that keeps people in one spot. If you've ever watched The Wire, The Wire is a show on HBO. That was many, many years ago. There's a plot in the 4th season by the character Bunny Colvin to keep all drug business in one spot to, quote, keep tabs. You know, keep all of the drug lords in one spot. We can keep an eye on you that way. That is essentially what these guys are doing to our MMOs. They know you'll be there for a while, and the best way to get your money is the hook, line, and sinker mentality. Keep you there for a little bit, change it down the road a little bit, and you'll kind of stay because you're kind of hooked into your character a little bit, right? And you kind of just stay for a bit until you realize it's too late. But that's the problem, guys. In the past, we used to have these MMOs in our lives for a longer period of time. Some of these MMOs, you were able to have a home for years. These days, it's almost as if we are tourists visiting a country for a small period of time and then packing our bags and leaving. You know, I kind of miss the days where we would fall in love with an MMO and feel safe, feel welcomed, you know, feel in a way respected. Feel like the guys